Reaperman here with a little game called Super Mario Land on Nintendo's Game Boy. As with a lot of my videos, this is going to be kind of a talk more than a review. I'll start with some facts about the game and some discussion of the environment that it was released into. Then I'll move on to my own personal experiences with the game and kind of how I got to know it. For those that are here just looking for gameplay, I do have a nice link in the top opposite corner to a full playthrough that I've done. It's no super gameplay. I'm not submitting to those Twin Galaxies chodes or anything like that, but it's some footage of the game that's unedited and doesn't have a fat old guy talking over the top of it, so go give that one a look. Also, it's worth noting that there may be ads on this or the other video, and this is not my doing, it's copyright claim related. And those copyright claims aren't coming from Nintendo like you might expect, but they're actually coming from a like a music protection and distribution organization, and they're protecting a hip-hop group that sampled the song and kind of rapped over the top as hip-hop groups do. So that's a thing. That's the thing that happens on YouTube, and what the heck, I'll link to those guys too. Thanks guys for making my life just that little bit more miserable. Anyway, back to Super Mario Land. Now, this game was actually created by Gunpei Yokoi. Now, he's the man responsible for the Game Boy itself, the Virtual Boy, and the Wonder Swan. Unfortunately, he died in the Wonder Swan era, so we won't be seeing any more modern stuff from him. And I'm sure I'm mispronouncing these Japanese names, by the way, but Shigeru Miyamoto was kind of legendarily hands-off with this Mario game. So it feels a little different than other Mario games, but it's got enough Mario veterans on board that it still kind of controls like Mario, but there's some definite oddities that didn't carry forward into future Mario games. Another thing to note is that this was a very early game on the Nintendo Game Boy. It actually launched with the Nintendo Game Boy. But it wasn't the pack-in game. So, Google forgot who said this, but it's been said to give away your best game for free, as in provided as a pack-in. And Nintendo had previously been doing very, very well by packing Mario games in with their consoles. But the age that Game Boy launched into was a very weird time. And people that didn't live back then, back in 1989, 1990, they're not going to understand what I'm about to say next. But the entire world was completely infatuated for that entire year by Tetris. Tetris was huge. We were being bombarded with ads to eat, sleep, and breathe Tetris. We were all looking for different ways to play Tetris. And this wasn't just, 2 or 3 weeks of real infatuation, kind of like Pokemon Go, where it was 2 or 3 weeks really, really big, and then it just kind of fizzled. No, this was months, probably the better part of a year, where we were really just looking for ways to play different versions of Tetris. And Nintendo decided to market their portable as a way to take Tetris everywhere. Which, it's kind of unusual, and there must have been some kind of awkward meetings over at Nintendo where they decided to, instead of packing in Gunpei Yokoi's own game with his own system, to actually pack in Tetris with it instead. That's just kind of an interesting little oddity of the time, I guess. To get the clean footage for this video, I'm using the NT Mini FPGA system by Kevtris. This is the Game Boy original core from the jailbreak pack. I really like viewing this game in the original 4 shades of green. It's just how I remember it. The NT Mini is an especially nice and responsive way to play Game Boy games. It just feels really good. There's other ways to get good footage of this game and other Game Boy games. For example, the Super Game Boy or Super Game Boy 2 via the Super NT. That's also an FPGA system by Kevtris, but one that's a little easier to get a hold of, and his systems are really dominating my game time over the last year. Now, Super Game Boy came out way later than Super Mario Land in terms of colorization, but inside the cartridge they they kind of provided some hand-colored palette love for some of the bigger titles that were earlier in the Game Boy's lifespan before they could be fully Super Game Boy compatible. And they just kind of did the best they could with that. As you can see, the colors are trying to be more Mario-like. And one thing I did notice about the Super Game Boy through the Super NT is that going from one system to another, this one definitely felt like there might have been another layer in the way, so possibly a layer of lag in there. It just didn't feel like Mario moved as crisp as with, for example, the Game Boy Core, or for example, the Game Boy Color Core, which you're seeing now from the NT Mini. Now, the one thing I really don't like about the Game Boy Color Core on the NT Mini is that, well, the Game Boy Color in general, colorization, is that the sprites are colored differently, and it kind of ruins some of the ceiling surprises in this game. So I just don't like it as much as the original 4 colors, or even the Super Game Boy 2 that kind of hide that. It's worth noting that there is a color hack of Super Mario Land, but I could not get that to work with this core. Super Mario Land was an important game for that time. I've talked to some other people, and they all fondly remembered their first time playing Super Mario Land. My first experience was while visiting a step-cousin. At the time, I had little to no experience with Super Mario. A little, I suppose. I wouldn't have my NES until 1993 or so. Arcades were mostly gone, but restaurants generally had a few arcade machines. And one of them would almost certainly be a Play Choice 10 or a VS system. Occasionally I'd also get some Super Mario when I'd go over to a schoolmate's house. I didn't have too many friends, though, and when I went over there, most of them wanted to play many more advanced games than Super Mario Brothers. And of course I'd played a little bit with Jumpman and Donkey Kong, and also regular Mario Brothers, and those were both back on my Atari 800. Anyway, I was visiting that step-cousin of mine out in rural Wisconsin, of all places. Later than that, he eventually became kind of an internet celebrity making different game things. Maybe someday I'll show off the system that he made for me. Anyway, he always had lots of consoles. At the time, I think he had Atari 800, ColecoVision, NES, and at the time he might have had the Genesis. I'm not totally sure, but I think he would have wanted to show me that instead. Anyway, he kept the Game Boy up in his sock drawer, the top drawer, I remember, of his little dresser. And I also remember he had a large box, like a moving box, in his closet, where he kept the boxes for the Game Boy and its related games. Anyway, he opened the drawer and he got it out for me, and he let me pick one game, and he had a very short stack of games, just like 3 or 4. Of course, I picked Super Mario Land because it was very rare that I got to play Super Mario Brothers, and I was just blown away that they could do a whole scrolling platformer right in the palm of my hands. It was incredible. This was a step well past the LCD and VFD portables that I was used to, and I was just hooked. So down in the comments, what was your first time playing Super Mario Land? The one odd thing about this game is that it's the only Mario Brothers game that I've actually beaten. That's why I've got the playthrough video that I linked to earlier. I remember lots of kids at school bragging about beating, for example, Super Mario Brothers 1, but that's not me. Super Mario Brothers Last World got pretty tough and I could just never do it. But not Super Mario Land. Its reduced size of just 12 levels and its lots and lots of one-ups just made it easier. It does get more tricky at the end, but it also helps that the final stage, the very final one, is a shoot-'em-up, which is a skill set that I have a lot more of than complicated platforming. It was really incredible watching Mario kiss Princess Daisy and watching them fly away in his spaceship. And that ending wasn't the only non-typical thing about the game. Very little of Super Mario Land carries forward to future games. Its enemies were largely unique. There wasn't really much legacy there. None of the themes for the world seemed to carry forward. About the only thing I can remember is at the end of each stage, There were two exits, one high and one low. The high one triggered a bonus game, and this struck me as just being a little similar to the end of the Super Mario World level where you try and break the tape as high as you can. But anyway, what do you think about Super Mario Land? Leave a comment below.